Hello guys, if you like my awesome gaming videos, my programming and web development courses, my editing courses and editing videos, and my tech talks and tech guidance, then you can consider subscribing to my channel and click on this bell icon to stay connected with me. So hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you are really fine and awesome, and I'm making this for you guys, the interview system and all the questions and solution based on it. And I researched a lot and get all the questions from different kind of websites and also from my ideas and showing it to you guys how we can interview with a better preparation in React, okay, and get a nice beautiful job at the beginning. So the understanding that React library is super important because it helps you to write better code in JavaScript, and you can understand a lot of modern JavaScript within this thing. So I talked about the beginner tutorial. As you can see, this is the beginner, which is all the questions like we have what is JSX. You need to understand a lot about it, what is the advantages of it, and the real DOM and the virtual DOM, which is also very important for the interview questions. And different kind of thing like state props and why it is important. I talked a lot about it in my previous video. You can check the playlist, you will see a lot of it. And I also created a project for you guys, which is React interview questions, where you can enter your question and your solutions as well. So in this particular video, I am going to talk about only the React junior level developer for the intermediate question, which is little bit tougher than the beginner one. Okay, what is reconciliation? It is super important to understand if you want to be a really good React developer. It means that when a component props or state changes, states are the data in your component, or the props are also the data that is passing from one component to another component. So those are the state changes. So React decides whether an actual DOM update is necessary. It means that actual DOM update. DOM is actually a document object model hierarchy. It has like body tag, it has like h1 tag, p tag. Those are the elements in a DOM. Okay, so if this thing is changes, React decides whether an actual DOM update is necessary by comparing the newly returned element with the previously rendered one. When something changes in your component or in your DOM, it will compare the newly returned element with the previous one. When the React sees that the both of the things are not equal, React will update the DOM, because the information or the state changes from previous one to the next one. So React will understand that now we need to update the real DOM. So when you see the update in the real DOM, you will see the information is changed inside the DOM, because React work on virtual DOM, but virtual DOM is only to compare the newly changes thing and the previous one. When it sees some changes, it will update the real DOM. This process is called the reconciliation, which is really very important to understand in a React concept. You don't need to change anything, just compare it with the real DOM, with the virtual DOM, which information is changed and which is not changed, and compare them. And if something changed, React will update the DOM. So total process is actually reconciliation. So this is super important. And for that to understand, you need to watch my previous tutorial where I talked about the React props and state, which are the main point of React. And then we have a question which is also in intermediate category. I put it, I don't know why I put it, but this is very important. What is fragment and why is better than dips? So what are the benefits of it? It's a common pattern in React which is used for component to return multiple elements. So as you know, within a div you need to pass the main root div, and inside the main root div you can add all thousands of elements and components, which is fine. Okay, which is the main thing that React need to return. Now what the fragments helps us. Fragments also let you a group of list of children without adding extra node. It is so efficient, it does not add any extra nodes to the DOM, which is extra node is actually anything. It can be anything. It can be title, it can be header, it can be footer, it can be p tag, it can be h tag, it can be any elements in HTML or the document object model. Okay, so it is so efficient, it doesn't add any extra node when you use these fragments instead of divs. So fragments are a bit faster. It is little bit faster, and it uses less memory by not creating extra DOM node. When you have to create extra DOM node, it needs some memory to lose. So the memory utilization is perfect, and so this is only has a real benefit or very large and deep trees. When you have a thousands of component inside a fragment or elements in complex websites and complex application, you will see the full potential, full use of fragments, which is really faster and less memory used. which is really important in modern application to make your application look better, fluid, faster. So as you can see, this is a real world application. As you can see, we have just a text, which is a simple React application that is returning only h1 element in a div. You can just remove it, or, and this also means that it has a fragment, or you can write fragment here, okay, and it will import fragment from React. But I won't suggest you to write it like this way. I hope you will like write it this way, okay, just empty. So I suggest you to write it without fragment, just simple empty angle brackets and return new element, and it will also work the same way. As you can see, it is also working same way. And within this this fragment, you can put multiple elements. Suppose I want to put a p tag here, as you can see, and this is for p tag, okay, just change it and just check it out. As you can see, this is a p tag. So this is working really fine, and there is no problem whatsoever. You can add multiple thousands and thousands of elements within this. So our next part is, what is portals in React? So portal is a recommended way, okay, remember, portal is a recommended way to render a child into DOM. Suppose you have a child which contains some p tag or h tag or image tag, anything. If you want to render that children into a DOM node that exists outside the DOM hierarchy of the parent component. If you have a hierarchy like parent has 2 child and that child has more 2 child, so this is the hierarchy. If you don't want to use that hierarchy and you need to get out of this hierarchy and render any component within a container, like we have here in the React DOM, you just call it React DOM.create portal. It will create a portal for you where you can render children into DOM node which is exist outside of the DOM hierarchy. It will be outside of the hierarchy, okay, so it would not have any relation like from the grandparent, parent, children. It will not inside the hierarchy. It will render within a portal, okay. This is completely different area. If you want to render in a portal, that is your child you want to portal, and in the function parameter, as you can see, you have your child, which is actually the thing or the element or the component you want to render in the DOM, and container is the container takes the parameter that which container you want to render that, okay. Suppose in the container I have a div, and in the div I want to render child, which can be anything, any element, okay. In real world scenario it might not be that important, but in React developer guidance and interview preparation, a lot of hectic questions comes, and this is super important to understand every single concept. And how to apply validation. Suppose you want to apply validations in React props or state. How can you do that? You just need to import prop types from prop types, and it should be static, and you just name any name like prop types is equals to, and then you have an object, and within the second bracket or the curly bracket you will name your props. Your props can be name, age, your birthday, your gender, all of this information. Suppose your name has a property which is a props that you want to pass, and you need to just verification it based on it. Suppose your prop should be a string, so you need to just what you imported, which is the prop types, and you just write it prop types dot, it will go to string and is required. Make sure it is required, otherwise it will not be validated, because name field, sometimes you want your name field is important or required. Name and Gmail or email field is super important in many cases. So you'll just write prop types dot string, because the name is a string type, it should be string. The number will not work here. And for age, it should be number, and it can be for boolean, it can be for any date field like published at, it should be prop types dot date field. And for it is it loadable or it is loading, then you will write like in a boolean way like prop types dot boolean. So I just gave you 2 examples, which is name and age for string and number. It can be boolean, number, object, array, anything can be possible. And then you just render and return within a fragment. As you can see, I have used the fragment syntax, and here you just import it with the JSX. As you can see, curly bracket, we just rendered a dynamic component welcome, and this dot props dot name, and this dot props dot name actually this thing, and this dot props dot is actually this thing. You just print it dynamically, and this is the thing that you want. So that is the validation, because the validation is based on the property like name, it should be string, age, it should be number, vice versa. or those type of things. So validations is also important in React applications. What is the use of React DOM package? You know, there is a lot of package for routing. We use React Router DOM, which I'll make the next video about. And then we also have React DOM. So it gives us some functions and abilities to what we can do. So the React DOM package provides DOM or document object model is specific method. It gives us some specific method that we can use. In the previous slide, if we go there, in the previous slide, as you can see, we used a method called render. The render will render anything like h1. In the h1, what we have write, it render in our application. What do we write in the h2 tag, it will render all of those things. So render will render each element in a container, and the container here is actually the fragment. We are returning those two HTML elements or the JSX here. Same way, the React DOM package provides DOM specific methods like render, hydrate, unmount component at node, find DOM node, and create portal at the top level in your app. Most of the component you might not need it. We only need it some like create portal, find DOM node, render. These are the most famous one. Unmount component at node is not that famous, and hydrate is also not so used. Most of the cases we use render. So those are the basic things that we used in React DOM packages. And if you don't import React DOM packages, although it is created by default when you create npx create React app, the React DOM package is suitable for doing this kind of functionality. So that we can show some information in a render function, all the elements that we declared. So these are the features and functionalities or the functions that we get when you use React DOM packages, which is very important and the root of our React applications. Then we have what is CRA. So when you just install any application for the first time, it gives us a simple template to create React app properly. So what is the thing it gives? It has React in it. We import React from React, which is also very important. In every application, we just call it import React from React. Otherwise, we cannot call any function. Then it has JSX, which is JavaScript XML that we use in every single component. When we return some JSX, we use JSX, which is very important. Then we have ES6, which is the modern JavaScript, which has a spread operator, object structuring, arrow functions. Those are the things that we use normally in every single React applications. And the next part is auto prefix CSS support. It has some prefix CSS support. We can add CSS to our React application because of this. And we have in React application, we have a lot of unit test run a lot of things. We have this. Suppose I want to show you in real world application. I go to our application, suppose, and as you can see, this is just a normal application. And this application, we see the index.css. This is for give us some CSS by default, and it has two things, app.css and index.css. So those are the two things that we given by default using the CRA. And then we have setup test.js. As you can see, setup test here by default by the React applications. If you go to the public, it will give you some index page. As you can see, it will give you some default. It has some manifest.json, which is given by default. There's a lot of things. We have a local server that runs this application. As you can see, this is the local server that's running. So there is a lot of things, and all the JSX code. If you see, these are the JSX code that we have wrote here. Within a p tag, we pass all the props and show this into the informations. And these are the lot of things, and there's a lot of things. As you can see, put React from React and all the render functions, all the CSS, JSX. So all of the things is given by CRA. So it gives us React, JSX, ES6, syntax support, and it has a CSS support. It has a unit testing support, and it has a live development server that I already showed you, that warns about some common mistake. If you have some mistakes, that you want to show in the web page, so that you can figure out what's the problem going on and you can fix this and debug it. So all the live development server and the problems that we show in the web pages is given by the CRA. Then we have what is strict mode in React. So strict mode is super important, and many people don't understand why it is important, because it is hidden. Sometimes people don't see why it is. So we have React.strict mode is a useful component. It's actually a component. So if someone asks what is React strict mode, it's actually a component. for highlighting potential problem in an application. If you when you building a React application, there will be a lot of problem, lot of bugs, and lot of red dots, red lines, and those are the highlighting potential problem in an application. So just like fragment, strict mode does not render any extra DOM element, it will not render anything extra DOM element, which is good, like a fragment, and it activates additional checks and warning for descendants. This is for development only. This is helpful for development. If you want to show some errors, some problems in your applications, it can help you identify those problems and you can solve this problem. So this is very suitable for development only. So we have a code snippet here, which is ReactDOM.render, and it has React.strict mode, and within the strict mode you just render your main component, which is app. Okay, app.js is our root component, and we have a document.getElement by id. This is the root element, or the within the ReactDOM.render you will just call your main component, which is root component is app.js, and wrap it with the React.strict mode so that we can get all the errors and the problems and we can debug it later. So if I show you this information, if you go to the app.js is our root, which is showing all the information in the web pages, as you can see on the websites and the local host. And this is the thing is rendered within a div document.getElement by id root in the index.js. If I go to index.js, and it is rendering ReactDOM.render, it is rendering our app. This app is actually this app component. Okay, so it is rendering this, and we'll wrap it with the React.strict mode. Okay, so this is the thing that we see. So it's super important to understand why this is. So number 18, so we are adult now. So what is the difference between React and ReactDOM, right? So React is one part, ReactDOM is another part. So what React gives us? React can create some element. Create element is a function that by calling it you can create elements randomly or manually. Okay, so it can be, create element can be anything, like you can create element like h1 element, and within this you give some value like I love React. So it will create a new h1 element, and within the value it will write I love React. Simple. This is a manual way to do this. You don't need to write h1 tag and value inside it. Just call create element, and the whichever element that you want to call, it can be p tag, it can be h tag, any of them it will render. And then we have a React.component, and for the React class component we just extend it and use all the methods and lifecycle methods and functions, constructors, super constructors, all of those things we can render. So in the React class component you will see React.component. Okay, and we have a React.children, and it will render all the children of the React component. So if I want to show you in the code snippet, like React, okay, dot create element, we have a lot of functions, like we can create a reference, we can create factory, we can create element, we can create a context. So we can just call create element, and it will take some information, like which information we want to render. It can be anything, it can be h1, it can be p or paragraph. Suppose I want to do like h2 tag, and here I want to write just testing h2 tag. Okay, and this is the thing. Suppose I want to console.log it here, console.log this thing, and save it and inspect it. Let's inspect it and go to console. As you can see, key is equals to null props object, and in the props we have just testing h2 tag. So this is the thing that we wrote here. Okay, so owner is h2 because this is the h2 element. So these are all the things that is created here. So this is creating an object which is h2 element. Within the h2 element we are just writing this. This is the same as writing this one, have a h2 tag, and within the h2 tag I'm just writing this thing. Just copy and paste it, and this is the same thing as doing the same this one. So this is just the auto system, and this is just a manual system. Okay, and it will do the same thing for us. So this is almost same thing. It is returning as a props. As you can see, this is returning, these are the strings, and its type is h2. So that is the main thing of React create element. It has a React component, which is used for the React class component, which gives a set states, component did mount, component will update, component did update, a lot of lifecycle methods. And it has a React children as well, which is also important. And React DOM actually give us something to render, React DOM.render and React DOM/server. It is also important to server-side rendering, which is also short name is SSR. Server-side rendering is important sometimes, and the React DOM.render is used most of the cases, which is very popular function. And we have a React DOM/server to render server-side string. We have React DOM server.render to string. React DOM server.render to string. It means that React DOM.server.render to string, it means that you can render anything to string that is coming from the server side even. So any information you can render it to string using the React DOM.server function and just calling render to string function. And you can also use React DOM server.render to static markup. You can use any static HTML markup, you can render those things statically. So let's check out our next question, which is how you implement server-side rendering, which is similar to previous question. You want to render something which is coming from the server, that is server-side rendering, and you want to render some information into text or a string, whatever format you want. So React is already equipped to handle rendering in Node server. So server-side rendering means that it render on server like Node servers. So React is a JavaScript library, and Node.js is also a JavaScript framework. Okay, so Node.js is actually for the backend and React is actually for the front end. So what is rendering in the Node.js server is actually server-side rendering, and React have that feature. A special version of the DOM render is available, which allows the same pattern as the client side. So the same pattern means that its main pattern is actually in the server side, and this is also works same for the React, as it is the same as JavaScript library, and the Node.js is also JavaScript framework, so it works really fine, which follows the same pattern at the client side. So how you can do that? You just import React DOM server from React DOM/server, which is important, and just import app, which is our main component, and you want to render everything, every single element in the app.js component, and you just call React DOM server and .render to string, and within the render to string you just give the entire app.js component. It will render every single thing into the string. So that's why React DOM/server is important, to call render to string function, so that we can do server-side rendering. This method will output the regular HTML. What we have in the app.js is actually the normal JSX and the HTML things. So those methods will output the regular HTML as a string, which can be placed inside a page body as the part of the server response. On the client side, React detects the pre-rendered content, which is already not rendered yet, which is the pre-rendered, and seamlessly picks up where it left off. So let's check it out, and let's do this. And in React .log, I just want to React DOM server .render to string. I want to render something. We need to import something, guys. We need to import something, and this is the thing, my information. I want to import that, and in the app.js I need to import my info. Okay, we're just rendering my info from our component, and we just console.logging React DOM server, and React DOM server has a function which is render to string, and it will render anything into a string from the HTML or the component. As you can see, I will just pass here my component or the my info here, and my info, just give it this tag so that it is a component. Okay, and it will console.log this component, and this component is actually this component, and this is just a JSX, HTML, all the informations, and it will convert it, okay, into this string. So let's do this and let's check it out. So React DOM server is not defined. We need to import that. React DOM server, okay, from React DOM/server. Okay, now it will work. As you can see, it's working really fine. And as you can see, so div, we in the right hand corner we have the console div data React root, and it has an element child info. Child info has a name, email, age, address, all of those things. So those are the things that is returned, and those are the thing are returned from my information, and my information component has all of the values, and these are the values is the same as these values, which is returned as a string log. And you just need to type of, I just want to see the type of this thing, the type of this whole information, and I'm just console.logging it. And as you can see, this is actually a string. It returning as a string because all the thing that it is coming with as a JSX, and it is converting into a string, and its name is a string, and it is working really fine. So this is the thing that you understand how to implement server-side rendering. So let's talk about another question. So how do you conditionally render any React element? Okay, so conditional rendering is so much important, and it is used hugely in many React applications, and without this I cannot imagine any application. It is so important. Conditional rendering is so used in React for dynamic conditional rendering based on certain condition. Suppose one element you have created for loading, if your application is not fetching data properly, it is inside loading, it should show a loader. If it is loading is finished, you want to show all the things that is coming from the API in a card view or in the nice list layout. So when it is not coming from the database, in that meantime it will show us some loading screen. So how do you do that conditional rendering? So you can do conditional rendering by that way, and for that we need to import React use state. Okay, so use state, this is the thing we need to use because this is a functional component and we need to use that thing. So we just declare a loading and set loading to change its state, and just call use state, and within the use state I'm just write it true or false, because loading can be true or false. It can be any type of data, it can be string and this kind of thing, but in case of loading I use the true, which is very important. And within the fragment tag you just give a curly bracket and the dynamic information you need to pass. And if it is loading, suppose I will write if it is loading, just give it a question sign because it is conditionally rendered something, and here you just write something, and if it is not true just write here something, and here you need to pass that element. Suppose within this bracket you just render just testing conditional rendering. If it is loading is equals to true, as you can see the loading state is equals to true is given by default here. Okay, so if the loading is equals to true, your application is loading and the data is coming from the API, and within this time you want to show your client that just testing conditional rendering, or please wait, something is coming. So if it is not loading, okay, if it is not loading, you just test loading done, data ready. Okay, and here you can write any just loading something. Okay, so if it is loading is equals to true, just say it's just loading something. If it is not loading, if loading is equals to false, then gives data loading done. Okay, so just remove every single thing, we don't need anything. Within this element you can put any complex information, like within this you can call any component. Okay, you can call any component, and it can be my info component. Okay, so you can call this component as well, it will also work. So big things is also working here. So just go and just check it out. As you can see, just loading something, it is loading something. When the loading is done, if you just select it to false, it means that loading is equal to false. Now this thing will not work, because if it was true it will work, but this is false now. So the right part is working, else part is working, which is loading done, data is equals to ready. Now what you can do, you can select an on click button here, and you go here, use the button. Okay, and button we have an on click property, and it will handle suppose click, and here you will write click to change click me. So button name is click me, and here you need to write a const handle click, and suppose this is an arrow function, and we write e.prevent default. E.prevent default, we will take some event, and it should be prevent default, and write it perfectly, and make sure it is e.prevent default. Otherwise the application will when you click on this button, click me, it will refresh this whole website, which is really bad practice for React application. You should not refresh it when you just click on this button. Okay, so make sure you do that properly. And then what you can do, when you click on this button, the state would be changed from suppose it at the beginning it is true, it is loading, but when you click on this button it should be false. So how can you do that? We just using set loading, and what we want to do, we want to make it false. When you click on this button, our set loading state should be false, and if it is false, then loading is equals to false. If loading is equals to false, it will render loading done. So when before click this button, this information would be rendered, but when I click on this button, this information would be rendered. Okay, because the state would be false, and if it is false, if loading is false, it will render this one. If loading is to true, it will render this. So before it will say that just loading something. When I click on click me, it will say loading done, and so you can change the state within this thing. So which is really important, and in React application, you will need it every single application and every single way. Then we have, can you force a component to re-render without calling set state? So set state is actually similar to in the hooks that we have just used, which is set loading or set data or set information, same thing. But in React class component we use set state. Okay, so don't use that in this modern era. Just use the functional component, which is lot simple and cleaner to understand. So it says that how can you force a component to re-render without calling this? Because if you know, if you use set state or this kind of state functionality, then it re-renders some component the informations. By default, when states on props changes, suppose the information changes or the props changes, your component will re-render, which is normal. Suppose in the previous application, the previous question I already showed, when you click the button, some information changes. It means that some states of the props changes. Just this application, if you refresh this, before that it is only this text just loading something. If you click on this button, it just change the props and states of this component. So it says that by default the state of the props changes in your application will re-render. If your render method depends on some other data, you can tell React that the component needs re-rendering by calling force update. Suppose if your some of your application it needed to do some re-rendering by force, you can use force update. Okay, so you just write component dot force update. It can change some information and it will re-render that component based on force update. So without calling set state, you can also change some information using the force update. Okay, it will change the state of the props if you want. But it says that it is recommended to avoid this as much as possible. So it is not recommended actually. You would never want to do force update. Okay, just use set state or the functional way you use the state. Those are the things are the better. So then we have how to loop inside JSX. So inside the JSX we need to loop in. We have to loop, which is really important for API calling and getting all the array of objects from our dynamic data. So for that we normally use a different kind of loop, or normally we use two kind of loop here in JSX. The first one is the traditional, which is for let I is equals to 0, I less than items dot let. The items can be any items, it can be any array. So it should be go to the length of these items and I plus plus. So first it would be 0 and then it would go to the 1, 2, 3 up to the items dot length. And we have a card product, and card product is actually the component, and we need to pass all those components as the props. As you can see, it takes some key because you need to uniquely identify some items. Suppose the uniquely identify is items, it will go to the individual item, which is items.i, and individual item has some ID property, and you just render those ID property as a key of that card product component. That is the thing that you want to render as a card of the product information. Like in the card we have the card name, price, description, all of those things, features, and it should have a key which is to identify it uniquely, as each item should have an ID. And you have a pass this name, which is equals to the curly bracket, or you can pass this as a props to the card product, and it has a suppose name, which will, if you go to the items dot each item, which is items dot I, suppose the first item it should be 0, second item it should be 1, third item it should be 2, and just render its name dynamically. So if you have thousands or thousands of crores of items, it will render all of their names and all of their keys into the card product. So normally we don't use it in React. Most of the cases we use the JavaScript map function that map each individual items and just name it as item, and we just use a callback function, as you can see, arrow function, and within the arrow function we have a simple bracket, and in the bracket we just call our component, that which component we want to show all those information that we mapped from. Suppose we have a items.map, each individual item has their name, has their ID. It can be thousands of items in your array, and we need to call each of their ID, like item.id, it will give their each of their ID, and item.name, it will give each of their name, and pass those props as a key and a name to the card product, so that we can show all the information that is coming from the API or array properly. So these are the two very important loop and the JS map function that we use regularly. Like suppose here we have an index.js function, we have a products, and products have an array of object. So each of the objects, suppose this is the object number 1, which is 0, this is the object number 1, which is 1, and this is the object number 2, and inside object number 0 we have name and brand. So how can we access that, right? We need to just call products.map. It will map individual product, it will go to this product first, and then it will go to this product first, and then it will go to this product first. Okay, so this individual item for the 0 item, and each individual item first it will render products.brand, because this individual, it can be anything, okay, but this name, this brand, this attribute name should be same as this attribute name. Okay, so you just give me all the items, just map each individual products and give me their brand and their name. Okay, and in this case it is giving us the brand name, and it will render this iPhone, Samsung, those are the these are all the things that would be rendered, because we are mapping through each individual object, and it is giving us this individual attribute of all the objects. So it will render this element, this element, this element, all of those things in a for loop. So I'm just giving you some example how it is working in the real world applications. Then we have what is the impact of keys, which is super important in React. So keys should be stable, it should be unique, it should be predictable. So React can keep track of the element, because each element have their name, age, address, all of the etc features. So each of the elements by index, and each of these elements should have their own unique index. It can be ID, it can be unique ID, it can be any name, but it should be unique. And without it, based on ordering, when React ordered those informations, when to show it in a list view, in a card view, it will render a lot of card. Suppose you have 1000 card, and if each of this card will have this object property, like its ID, name, price, all of those information, and it will render all of those items, but it should have a certain key that which information I want to render those things. So it always considered and try to find those key or item ID or this ID, so that it can tie those ID with corresponding value. Like I have ID number 1 and its name is this, and I find ID number 2 and it has its own name, so that it doesn't match with other component or other element. It shouldn't be duplicate. Okay, so and the tied with it, and the data is being represented. So data is being represented here is the name is equal to item.name. So in the item we just map through each individual items, and item.name has it is a property. I want the name of this item. Okay, and this item name has a corresponding ID, which is item.id. Okay, so this is the thing, the data is being represented is actually the name, and the ordering is based on the key. So this limits optimization, but with the key it can reorder items or the elements without needing to re-evaluate them as much. So it is more efficient and more faster if you give it a unique, predictable and stable key. Suppose in this case item.id, it is really easy for React to understand which element we want to render corresponding to its value, like name, price, those things. So it is really easy for React to reorder them. So those are these are all the questions that I need to solve and show you in a particular video. So this is the first part actually for intermediate junior level developer guide. The second part will cover a lot of things like React routing and a lot of lifecycle methods. that we want to show you and understand with the pictures and each definitions, because those are the things are so important to understand for React developer. That is so important, and I should do it in another video so that you can guys understand it better. So one video can be a little bit bigger, so which is really bad for many people, because many people don't try to learn from big videos, they just like the short videos. So I'll split it into two parts. This was the first part of the intermediate section. The second part would be the intermediate section, part 2, where I talk about the routing and those set state and the lifecycle method of React functional component, as well as the class component. Okay, so those are super important, how you can use those things properly in the class component and the functional component. I will discuss everything on that. So till then, take care, bye bye. I'll see you in the next video with a lot of almost amazing awesome content. So thanks for watching, subscribe, share, and give a like as much as possible so that I can get more help and give you much better content in this area. Okay, so till then, take care, bye bye.